Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This week's topic is going to be giving what's happened about virtual teams and Zoom. We're going to be talking about trust in the workplace, what that means as an individual and what that means to the collective.
It's an interesting topic, especially following on from what we mentioned on our last conversation. You know, this is going to be a key area of concern for new hires, especially in this current climate, you know, as we move through it.
Well, what's interesting is someone said, this is a really interesting piece of information, that if you're having an interview for a job on Zoom, you're 40% less likely to get it because you're not being trusted on a call.
Oh, wow. Bloody hell. That's, that's pretty bizarre because, people potentially won't be hiring at the moment anyway. And even if they are, they're going to have to be doing it over Zoom, aren't they? Or a virtual means rather than in person, I suppose. And then, you know, even when people are allowed to interview or meet in person, perhaps the social distancing might be in place. And so what effect does that have as well?
I have concerns about the word called social distancing. I think it means that I'm just cutting myself off to everybody, where it should be physical distancing, where we can still socialize and converse.
Yeah, true.
So we're not going to switch that off, but my conversation maybe with a bigger loudhailer, because from 2 meters you might not be able to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, true. That's a really good point about language, isn't it, as well? And I know we've discussed that in the past as well.
Yeah. So basically, the slide said, how do individuals connect with the teams and have trust? So there's 2 things there. Trust can be logical and rational, and trust can be emotional and instinctive. So how do we build that trust in the workplace if we're actually in this physical workplace called an office? What does that look like to you and me when I go into the office and I've never met this person before? It's like the interview situation. Yeah. When you sit down, I'm going to interview you, Bill. Logically and rationally, I want the job. Emotionally, instinctively, after 5 minutes, I know I've not got the job.
Yeah. Sure, it's a really interesting concept. I like that.
So, yes, I know logically and rationally I can do this.
Yes.
But instinctively, there's something that doesn't feel right here. And that can be displayed on a one-to-one or a one-to-many basis in a physical building.
Yeah, of course.
Now I'm going to this new virtual office where my job may still be the same, but I'm connecting with people in a different way. Yeah. So what does that trust mean in that context? And what's the differentiator in that context? Am I taking my trust and make it virtual? What does that mean to you individually and collectively?
Yeah, agreed. How does instinct come across as well when you're not? I don't know. My own perception is it's got to be different in person and virtual, regardless of the situation or the context. You just pick up on things. You know, the energy of someone, perhaps, when you're in a physical location with them, as opposed to online or virtually.
Well, that's really interesting. It's like you go into a room and you shake hands with people. You're not, by the way, hello, how are you? And by looking at the body language, the handshake, the language. Oh, wow, where's this? Who do I trust in this arena?
Yeah.
And if you've already got that, that's fine. But if you haven't, I mean, someone said to me quite interestingly, I'll trust you now until I don't trust you. Is that logical and rational? Because your emotional instinctive is not coming into that. I trust you now. My brain says that, but I'm getting other signals here.
Yeah.
They all matter. They all matter.
Yeah.
So do you want to go on to the next slide now? Yeah. So this slide's really interesting because given what was said previous to that, there's a logical and rational components to all this infrastructure, but there's also emotional and intuitive aspects of that.
Yeah.
So basically, when you're in the office and when you're working with the team, this all comes into play. At what point from an individual and collective are you actually switching them on and off? And which one is really important to you? They're all important, but which one comes up for you first is a really interesting question when you're joining a team.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And as well, I suppose it's got to be really difficult for the sort of the team leader to understand all these dynamics and appreciate the situation and make more of an effort to either display trust or to try and gain trust as well. So obviously trust is a two-way street, or it should be a two-way street.
But so therefore, if you've been a team leader in a normal physical office, how does that trust be transferred to the virtual office? There's a whole different hierarchy going on there. There's a whole different dynamic going on there. And one of the things I've been listening to is we've been in lockdown for 3 months. So while I've been at home for 3 months, I've done lots more work. I've done more qualifications. I've done more learning, and I'm now more experienced. When I take that back to my boss, what does that mean to them from a trust point of view? And by the way, look what I've been doing while I've been furloughed or while I've been working from home. My qualifications, my personal development's gone up another level.
Yeah, absolutely.
What conversation do we have now? Do you give me more money? Do I get promoted because I've actually done this individually and collectively? So basically, I've done active listening. I've had effective questions, but I've done active learning and personal development.
Absolutely. And it also goes to, examples of that could demonstrate as well that people that are empowered more through trusting them more to go and just give them sort of free rein to do what they need to do in line with the vision of what needs to be done or the objectives. Again, empowerment I think is so valuable for organizations, and again, it doesn't come without trust. Like I say, your example there is a fine example of that. Give someone the ability to control their own life and their own sort of progress, and you'll be surprised what they do.
Yes, so basically on one level I'm looking at this wonderful word called consistency. I'm actually doing my job consistently, but at the same time, I'm actually doing something out with that consistency. And how do you bring that back in? By the way, I've gone and done this learning situation because I think it'll be valuable for me. How can I put that back into the team? And is that threatening you as an individual? Or by the way, collectively, we've done all this. Where do we take this when I go back to my boss?
Yeah.
The EQ thing is really interesting.
Oh, God.
Yes. I think people dismiss it as something it's not worthy or worthwhile. And it's a threat to both the individual and the team. You think differently from me. So I've gone away and done this. And actually, I've made myself vulnerable by willing to learn in a different way. And therefore, my effective question is, what would you like to do with my newfound ability and competency in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. It's EQ's been pushed for the forefront over the last 10, 20 years, really raised its head in sort of common practice, but people are still, I don't think, buy into it to a certain degree. Again, it's difficult because it's intangible to a certain extent. So, and it perhaps has had a bad marketing at the start, where people's perception of it wasn't that it was something for someone to go and relax on a beach and kumbaya and all that kind of stuff, where we know that that's not the way it's got nothing to do with it at all. Because I know people have speak about emotional intelligence, and there's this negative stigma attached to it within certain context, but it is showing increasingly now in sort of when people are analysing what makes people that little bit better than others, perhaps in performance wise, or organisations as well. It's usually the EQ context rather than the IQ that is that sort of the factor that makes them that little bit better.
Yes, I mean, I had a discussion last week about, if you want to go and do this job, go and get qualified, go and get the certificate, go and get the piece of paper. But actually, on the other side of the equation is, I know this feels right, and it's going to be good for my health, well-being, and for the good of the company and the planet. And it's like you've got this dichotomy going on. Which one do you want to measure? And how do you measure it? Because you can't measure it a different way. And if you're going to measure it, you're going to have effect on the measurement.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you want to go on to the next slide now?
Yeah, I'll jump back.
Yeah, we can jump back.
Yeah.
So basically, this is what happens in an office environment. When you have trusting behavior with a trustworthy behavior, you have the motivation to behave and engage logically and rationally. Absolutely. By the way, logically and rationally, my brain's telling me it's okay to go and do this because I'm motivated to do it from a logical and rational perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore, your trusting behavior is an ongoing thing, and a pattern of trust is established. I know this person, logically and rationally, I can work with them. But does it feel right? Does the emotion feel right? Does the internal mechanism, do I really want to work with this person? And that happens, from an office perspective. And outside, logically and rationally, I'm going to go with this. But there's another side to me saying, does this feel right? Is it consistent with what I want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it, again, your words there have encaptured it correctly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It can go around and round, and reinforcing system of trust, but also that can go the opposite way as well. It can be positive or negative reinforcement.
And then on the bottom one, when you've got I love this, when you've got a well-established virtual team. So people have been setting up this well-established virtual team in the last 3 months. So are they the same people who you've been working with? And actually, when you're doing the virtual team have got their own hub. So when you're connecting to another virtual team, if it's replicated, so am I taking one Zoom team? So there you've got more than one hub. Are you replicating that relationship from one hub to the other? When you're looking at it logically and rationally, I've set this hub up because you want me to work with other person in the team who I've never met before.
Yes.
So you're transferring this mature and trusting relationship from one team. Is that being repeated on the other team? Because it's not habitual. I've only met you once, and I've now got this new team to set up. But I've been told I have to engage with you. So yes, my boss has said logically and rationally, I want you to trust this team.
Yeah.
That's being self-imposed by a hierarchical construct, which is your boss.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's I mean, again, the question I'd pull out of that as well is that a question I find quite interesting is that we've moved to these virtual teams, well-established virtual teams, you put it right now, in 3 months. Why didn't they exist? If they didn't exist in those organizations, why not beforehand? And does trust have something to sway in that? Again, it comes back to the hierarchy and their perception of trust within their organization, perhaps.
So basically, if you worked in an office with 100 people and you had 10 teams of 10 people, what's that trust with those teams corresponding to the 10 teams across that office structure? Or by the way, some got signs up, teams A to whatever it was, and I only work in team A. Now virtually, I'm talking to team A to team Z, and I'm trying to transfer the trust in team A to B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah.
And is it being self-imposed? Because I'm now working from a shed with 10 other people in their own sheds, flats and everything.
Yeah.
And you're asking me to set this team up. So at what point do I set that contract up? And what question has to be asked? What are we contracting here? Virtually, we didn't contract before when it was in an office.
True, yeah.
And who signs the contract? Who's signing the contract?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, very good.
You want to go on to the next one, if you want? Right. So building trust in our individuals and team is just more than a feel-good factor. That completely negates everything we've said previously, because we've talked about the rational and logical. Yes, it's more than just a feel-good.
Yeah.
We're supposed to trust our team, and it's true understanding of the outcome. So what's the outcome for our team's trust? And when people go back into the office, am I now switching on a new form of trust that exactly was original in the trust, and now it's been transferred again? So I've got virtual trust. Now people want to go back into their office 1 day a week, and say, I'm taking that trust back into the office. Do we have two forms of trust running in parallel, or is it just the same?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to have, isn't it? In a conversation, and the dynamics then of those that do and don't go back into the office for that 1 day, perhaps, as well. What's the effect of that on Team A member that, you know, is virtually in Team ABC but physically only in Team A? What's the repercussions of that within trust?
Yes, and I think from a team dynamic point of view is, has my trust factor changed radically, that I have to go and have a new conversation with this person about, I'm now working with the office 1 day a week, can transfer to the virtually 3 days a week. Is that different? It might not be different because I already know who you are, because we'll work in the office with that team, but now we're working with all the different parts of the team, and suddenly I've met someone from Team B who I know exists in the office, but now I'm meeting them for the first time in a new team structure. I mean, we don't want to make this overcomplicated, but the point is, at the end of the day, is we're going to have to work to a new, different model and different paradigm. So what are we putting in place that makes us going to logically and rationally know it's okay, but also feel right for us from an individual and collective point of view, which has never been asked before.
Yeah, no, it definitely shouldn't be too complex, but I think you need to think about these the leaders need to think about these questions, and they may dismiss them, but if you haven't thought about it, then you don't know. You know, you've not given it conscious thought. You don't know the repercussions of X, Y, and Z. But yeah, definitely agree. It should definitely not be complex.
I mean, there's the benefits of trust in the place. We know and understand why it matters. And you've got the value stream, the outcomes, job performance, increases employee engagement, encourages employees to spread the word about the company, and encourages curiosity. I think the last bit is really important. The curiosity for me is having this elastic mindset. Can I just go and stare out the window when actually logically and rationally I want you to do this task? But can I think about it in a different way and come up with maybe something different? That's a really good trusting perspective. I'll trust you to go and sit out the window for half an hour and come up with something different that I've never thought of before. Do you trust me to do that? Oh, by the way, but we're measuring what you do every 5 minutes on your computer because you're logged on.
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting point you make then. I've recently just finished Daniel Levitin's book, The Organizational Mind. And in that, you know, there's reference to a lot of studies that suggest that exactly that taking that time away to just reflect or just think about or just, you know, meditate or think of something different other than a task is usually, well, it's usually beneficial to the task rather than 100% focus on it, you know. And, you know, I'm sure everyone listening or watching has had a fantastic idea come to them when they're driving or doing something totally different to what they need to be thinking about, but that's when the idea pops into their head. That's the power of sort of, you know, relaxing the mind and letting the mind do its thing without consciously thinking about it.
Well, it's interesting. I sometimes have a blank sheet of paper and sometimes I just write one word down. One thing I was thinking about at the moment, and it's people say, oh, look at all the time we're saving driving and not on the train. Yes, we see people on the train with 3 mobile phones, 3 laptops, and they're working. And sometimes, you know, there's nothing better than having a notebook and a pen, and you're on the train or you're on the bus, and sometimes you just have to write a word down. So we need to give people the allowance and the creativity and the curiosity to say, I'm just going out for a walk for 10 minutes, and I've suddenly thought about something, and just write something down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I loved about driving in the car, because something would come up and sometimes I'd stop in the next lay-by and just write something down.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel. Yeah.
The curious mind, yes.
It is. And I find it bizarre that there's so much evidence out there, or maybe not evidence as in hard fact, science fact, but there's so many companies that are examples of this, prime examples that this is what they encourage within their organization, and they're in the top 50 companies of the world. So it can't be that wrong. Yes, I get that there'll be other things that matter, but if that's a big fundamental part, that the curiosity, and again it goes back to trust and empowerment, why is the rest of the world so slow to catch on?
Because they're coming from a different value stream, they're coming from different behaviors. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like, how much money it's going to cost and how much money it's going to save. But actually being curious is a completely different value stream.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm bringing a value to an individual and a collective.
Yeah.
And it's, by the way, here's an office and there's nothing in it apart from a pen and a piece of paper. Would you like to write something down once a week? Mm-hmm. And nothing's off the table, and put it on a board, and people will walk past it and go, that's an interesting word. What does that mean to you? Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, exactly that. I love that, putting things on for others to see, to then have their input. And I think, I can't remember the exact story, but I know it's a Google story. I think it's Google Chrome or the Gmail, but there was a problem that they were having, they couldn't solve it. And in the canteen, apparently, Larry, one of the founders of Google, put up a note saying this is not good enough on the notice board. And apparently an engineer in his lunchtime saw what it was, and basically over the weekend figured out the problem, and made Google a hell of a lot more money. But he had nothing to do with the project. It was literally just something that he saw. And again, because he was empowered to make decisions for himself that were in line with the organizational vision, he just went away and did it.
Yes, I mean, there was a story I read a long time ago about people from a bakery were having a major problem about the dough. Mm-hmm. And someone said, well, I'll go and look at my washing machine and work out how it works. And then transferred the thinking of the washing machine, the whole cycle, and said, if you change your cycle for bread making, it'll work differently. And they took it on board.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that. Shall we?
So how long have we done so far?
I think about 20 minutes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So basically, this is going to be part 2 of next week. Yes. We're going to talk about, we've talked about trust, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. There are now these elements of mistrust, which is instinctual, feeling of unease, and the next one will be distrust, evidence and form opinion. So, by the way, do I distrust this person because of an opinion, evidence, or is it mistrust because it doesn't feel right?
Yeah.
Watch this space.
I look forward to that conversation. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.